On today's episode, Mark Buckingham, affectionately known as Bucko, ex-GB runner, ex-international and GB pro triathlete, Olympic team coach and head coach at Brownlee Fitness. Hey everyone, it's Pete here and welcome to the show. Today we've got Mark Buckingham, head coach of Brownlee Fitness, joining us, talking to us all about consistency. And this is great to hear Bucko's perspective. It drives deep into the heart of the training methodology that we have at Brownlee Fitness. And so this is the beginning of a new conversational style approach to our interaction with our audiences around the world and to our squad. And so it's the very first one. It's the inaugural one. And who better to kick off the show than our leader, our master of everything training, Bucko, as he's affectionately known, not only in the triathlon community, but deep within the heart and soul of the squad. So sit back. I hope you enjoy this episode. It's the first of many. We've got some incredibly exciting guests lined up over the coming months. And here, without further ado, is Bucko, our head coach at Brownlee Fitness, talking about the significance and importance of continuity in your training. Yeah, I mean, actually, you know, we've been working together for almost 2 years, and in that time, I've never been injured. Yeah, that's very significant. I've never been injured, and I've always been ready to race. So even in the kind of off season, if an opportunity came to race, I'm literally always ready to race. And it's just a case of dialing in the last kind of 6 to 8 weeks if it's a major event like a Worlds or a Europeans or something. Yeah. So that's really the context for this conversation. It's all about how important it is to train, you know, consistently. And that's the key word in triathlon. So I'm a great example of someone that, you know, I'm 55, I'm no spring chicken, but I'm always ready to race. I'm always fit. I'm always healthy. And that, I believe, largely comes down to, you know, your approach to coaching and your approach to training and the methodology. But let's dial in specifically to, you know, why we think it's important to be consistent.
Yeah. So I think consistency is one of the biggest training fundamentals that I've had as a coach, and that at Brownlee Fitness, with the experience of John and Al, have brought together. Consistency, I think, from the guys' point of view, always showed in their racing in the early years. So a lot of guys that train consistently will race consistently, and it's a really hard thing to do in endurance sport, is sometimes do all that training and then get to the start line and still execute like your best race. And I think over the years, the lads developed a system to keep it really simple, the training, and create a routine that they roll through week on week to build that consistency. Because once they had done it 100 times and know they can nail that threshold session in the pool or that hard VO2 session on the bike and nailed that week on week, they knew that they got to a race and they were like, same thing, let's go again. I think we sometimes forget that all training is basically trying to simulate what you're going to do in a race. And from that, you're going to get a lot of fitness and gains from it. But rather than the other way around, trying to get like really fit and really strong and really fast and then go and do a race by doing something completely different to what's demanded. Like, I definitely think that people kind of, should be doing a training plan that's rigged towards what race day looks and feels like. So you've kind of been there before. Again, you get on that start line going, right, I know what's going to come, and you dive in. You've got that first hard bit of the swim, you know, your arms going crazy, the heartbeat's pumping, you're breathing in loads of air, but you're going, I felt this last Tuesday and the Tuesday before and the Tuesday before that in the VO2 set. I've been there before. So a lot of the training plans we do are really tailored towards what you're going to get on race day.
Brilliant. And in your view, Bucko, what are the consequences of not training consistently? So I know as a Brownlee fitness athlete, my plan comes up on the program. I know what I'm doing week in, week out. There is variety. There's a lot of interesting stuff. We can touch on the focuses that, for instance, if I need to work on my critical swim speed, if I need to work on my power on the bike or my speed on the run, we can dial in these focuses. And so I kind of know the rhythm and the pattern of my training, but there is an awful lot of variety in there. But the consequences of not being consistent, what in your experience have you seen? And what's your view on that?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest thing of not being consistent in training would be, you'll end up getting to a race and every other race might produce like a less desirable result. So that's probably the big thing. But the other thing that if you don't get the inconsistency in training, if you don't get the consistency in training right, you'll kind of get lost in the program. So again, coming back to our training fundamentals and how we structure the week for most athletes, we try and keep it as simple as possible. And in an ideal world, Pete, you'd do the same 15 to 20 sessions a week.
Yes.
Every week.
Yeah.
But because we want, a bit of variety and we need stimulus and motivation by doing something new, we can't just give athletes the same old thing. But in its most basic form, that's what I believe we should be doing. Because otherwise, if you try and throw in like new sessions or try and reinvent the wheel, athletes just get lost. And if you start feeling like tired, injured, ill, is that because of the session that you've just done and that's changed and you've tried to go further or faster? Or is it because there's something else? So although we try and vary some of the sessions, we try and keep them quite similar.
Yeah.
So it's just giving you guys an idea of what a Wednesday aerobic long ride should feel like, instead of going, well, next Wednesday you're going to go up loads of hills and you're going to go up that hill a bit harder, and on the flat, then you're going to go and pick it up a little bit more, or we're going to work on cadence this week. Now we just keep Wednesday as that 2.5 hour zone 2 ride, Pete, and you'll do that every week.
Yeah. No, and that, by the way,
just go a different route.
Yeah. And I actually live that. I live this program, so I can sort of, confirm that that's what we really mean by being consistent. I know that every Wednesday we've got this particular process, this particular prescription for this particular program, for this particular session. I know what we've got coming up at the weekends. They do vary slightly. And then we start to introduce these focuses as well. So then we can start to supplement that core consistent training program, which does deliver results. And we can see every time. How often are we testing, Bucko, just to give some indication as to kind of how we're testing the methodology, if you like, the approach?
Yeah, so athletes with us will test sort of between 2 and 3 months normally. We do like a critical swim speed test, an FTP test on the bike, and normally like a 30-minute run test, but purely to find zone data. So, for example, an Ironman athlete doing an FTP test on the bike, that'll show roughly what they'll hold for an hour, but the test's only 20 minutes long. So it's 20 minutes of maximal power, which isn't that important for an Ironman distance, because they're wanting to nail down zone 2, whereas this could be zone 4 or 5 that they're operating in. So we try and bring athletes back to the fact that we're doing this just to find some zonal data, and that's it. You don't need to start worrying that, my FTE hasn't increased, or, I haven't seen this, that, or the other. It's more just to say, when they're plugging the zones in, we use a 5-zone model: recovery zone 1, aerobic zone 2, tempo zone 3, threshold zone 4, and VO2 zone 5. We try and keep that nice and simple again, so athletes don't get lost in like a 7 or 8 zone system. But also each one of those for an individual might relate to their kind of race pace. So for you, Pete, I think you're zone 3 or 4 for most of the racing that you do. And you know that zone inside and out because all the training is rigged towards that.
Yeah, that's really brilliant insight, actually, because when we first started and we were trying to identify what my kind of threshold pace was, and I remember, first couple of races, I blew them apart, and heart rate went like almost maximal at some points, and it was just calibrating it over the first few races where we got to it's 150 to 155. Do not breach that zone. Throughout your race, we'd identify these metrics, and it's great because I'm just looking. I'm swimming. Clearly, you can't see your heart rate at that point, but the moment I'm out the water, from the bike all the way to the finish of the run, I'm glancing at my watch or the bike computer with my heart rate data, and I've had great success. I've always built towards finishing strong, never not finished. So yeah, I can attest to the efficacy of that approach for sure. Testing in those zones so that you know what you're racing, and you can deliver your best performance. So yeah, that's tremendous, that, Bucko.
The other thing that when I think about consistency, Pete, I use the other word of sustainability.
Yes,
like training and your plan and your day-to-day environment needs to be sustainable. And the reason I say that, Pete, is because when an athlete comes onto the Brownlee Fitness squad and we ask them like the goals, we also ask them what the current training load is. And I appreciate when you kind of have a new goal and you've got UK Ironman to do in 16 weeks time, you're like pumped and ready to do it. And so it takes a bit of reining people in sometimes, going, hang on, in terms of getting this right, we need to know what is sustainable in terms of the hours a week that you're operating at. And normally people go, yeah, I can do 15, 16 hours. And I'll say, yeah, but can you do that for a 16-week period? And so that, for me, that's really important, is not only that it's consistent, but in that you kind of, you're signing yourself up to a plan that you can hold for that full duration. Yeah. So, Pete, if you came to me and said, Bucko, doing a sprint distance triathlon, I want to do 10 weeks training, I reckon I can do 10 hours, but this first week I might do 20 hours, and then I can do maybe 15 a week after, because I'm out of time, I'll say, well, yeah, brilliant, but it'd be much better if you went 10 hours, 10 hours, 10 hours, 10 hours for 10 weeks rather than going 20, 7, 8, 15, and all over the place. Again, in that there's no consistency. You're just jumping around everywhere. And I appreciate people's like work-life balances doesn't always allow them to do a consistent amount of training. So one of the things that we kind of enforce is aim to try and complete 80% of the plan. So if you're on a 12-hour a week plan, we'll say aim to do 80% of that over the month or the entirety of the plan, not just that week. We know people's weeks are kind of like all over the place. You don't always know what's coming, but try and hit 80% of the plan, and we try and make every plan sustainable, so that you do get that consistency.
Yeah, and I think we've spoken about this in the past. It's by following 80% of the plan, you are almost you're fit enough, pretty much, to take on any challenge. So it's just dialing it in, getting close to a race or event. So you don't need that 100% completion of every. Yeah,
because we know people get ill, injured. There's a wedding on, someone's birthday, whatever. These things comes into play. So yeah, it's a good point, Pete. We've built that into all the racing plans and the rolling plan that the guys are on as well, to take into account that. We know that you're not probably going to hit on average what you were hoping to do all the time. So yeah, there's definitely wiggle room.
Good stuff, Bucko.
So the best way that I think people can ensure that they're training consistently is to try and keep their routine simple. So we said it at the start of the podcast, Pete, is that was something that when you came into my coaching structure, that I didn't try and create all these crazy sessions all the time. We tried to find out that perfect routine for you from Monday to Sunday and just try to replicate it week on week. So that's the first one. Keep training as simple as possible. If you're coming up with your own sessions, like great, but try and keep them simple. We had one bit of methodology was if you couldn't remember a swim session, having done it 2 or 3 times, then the swim session was probably too complicated.
Yeah.
And a lot of that came from Alistair. He was like, I want to be able to read the swim session on the board. I don't have to read it 100 times. Like, I need to get it. It doesn't need like 50 lines of text. You know, you need your warm up, your prep set, your main set, cool down, like done. So a lot of what we do at Brownlee Fitness is incorporating that simplicity into the sessions so that you guys, again, are not getting lost or confused in training sessions, because there's actually very little science data out there that shows that you need a really complex training session to be better.
Yeah.
You just don't.
Well, I also...
The other bit, Pete, would be to keep training consistent is don't keep searching for that magic bullet, because it doesn't exist. I know that we constantly as athletes wanting to learn, and part of the reason you're listening to this podcast is to learn more about it. Like, I get that. But in terms of like different ways to do training and like methodology, sometimes keeping it simple is the best thing, but not trying to constantly change it because you've seen someone else do like a different session or do it a different way. I think find that kind of routine and that system that works for you. So it might be like heart rate data. You know that inside out. You've always worn a chest strap. You find that easy to use, and you're going to do all your training forevermore based on heart rate data. I haven't got a problem with that. I think that's great. On the other way, people might look at it and go, oh, we've seen people are lactate testing now. I need to do that. Well, yeah, you could do that, but what happened to all the good stuff you were doing off heart rate?
Yeah.
Oh, well, okay, try lactate, but then someone might say, well, try power, and then try cadence, changing stride length, and all of a sudden you're doing this. Like, your week's just involved and you're just lost with the system. So again, there's those things I mentioned have got the place, but if we're just looking at consistency, I think keeping it, simple in terms of your structure is really important. And then the other things as well to keep consistent is focus on your training. And no, that sounds simple, but we spend a lot of time, again, looking elsewhere for things. You know, some people will spend more time looking on Wiggle for equipment than they will actually training.
Right.
So put your energy into training. Like, it really does help. It really does help.
Brilliant. But would you like to meet, past or present? They could be dead or alive. And if so, what would you want to know, or why would you want to meet them? So you think I'll just give you an idea, Bucko, to help you while you're thinking. So I asked Lizzie to ask me that question, and mine was Sir Roger Bannister. Yeah. So if I could meet anyone, past or present, and so I'd like to meet him, and then what would I like to ask him? I would like to have known what that last 50 seconds was like. What kept him, it was 3 minutes, 59.4 tenths of a second, right? So in the last 50 seconds of that race, what on earth was he thinking and feeling that got him over the line under 4 minutes? I've even when he was alive, I would love to have asked him that, because he must have been going through hell. What got him over the line?
No, that one. Yeah.
So that's my one.
They're really cool.
He was such
that's a good one. And it means quite a lot to me, does Roger Bannister. I was lucky enough to go and do the 50-year anniversary mile race at Iffley Road on the same track that he did it, and I actually won the race. And presented with a medal by Chris Brasher, who's one of the pacemakers for it. So
story.
That was pretty special. Yeah. But yeah, that's a good one. You have put me on the spot 100%, Pete, because there's probably so many different people. But do you know the ones that I'm wanting to go with is just kind of family that I never met. Like, I never met my granddad from my mum's side, or my great granddad from my dad's side, who sound like incredible people. And my granddad Clark, apparently was like a really sporty person, like really fit individual and whatnot, who they say I look a lot like, and aunties and uncles all say I remind me of them. And so I think that would be really good, just to see where sport took him and all the great stuff that he did. So I think that would be my answer.
Was he a
he did do quite a bit of running. But he was an all-round sports person, and that's kind of what I was growing up. I just did anything and everything. And sometimes you don't know where that kind of stems from, but I probably had a lot to do with it. So yeah, I think that's that'd be an interesting one for me. And then I think someone from a sporting world. I grew up like idolizing Haile Gebrselassie. I just loved the way that he ran.
Oh yeah. It was 800 meters.
He was just the runner when I was kind of growing up. I got to watch him race live once in Crystal Palace. That was pretty cool. But he was just like a really nice guy and charming guy, and did loads for his country, and employed like hundreds of people in his local area and stuff, and gave a lot back to the community. So yeah, Haile's definitely a cool guy that, yeah, it's quite hard to meet these people and get into contact. Maybe you'll get him on the podcast.
We'll get him on the podcast. That's it. That's going to be a goal.
Yeah.
Brilliant, Bucko. That was mega. That was brilliant. Thanks, Bucko. I appreciate you taking the time. Thanks for listening to the show. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button to get instantly notified of new episodes. And we have an exciting lineup of guests planned, all brought to you to help you with your triathlon journey.